Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the University of Liberian History. I call this. You are in for a treat. This is our history channel, and the lecturer is Ms. Kawu Famule. I am only a student here, who is here to serve as a student and as a cheerleader. You know, I've always admired the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and this woman is from Wisconsin. So you know she knows her stuff. And most of this stuff,
UW Oshkosh. That was Wisconsin Madison. University of Wisconsin Oshkosh and University of Minnesota.
great.
But
So
yeah,
what we want you to do is everything that is being presented here is academic. You can fact check, you can
yeah,
question, you can contribute towards it. She's here, she will be willing. If there's error anywhere, that's what this is all about. Nobody has an exclusive right to any knowledge or intelligence. But what learners do, what teachers do is they teach, and we keep adding onto our knowledge base. This is
yeah.
why she's here. So if you have any information, if the lecture touches you the wrong way, you want to dispute, that's fine too.
Bring it on.
I have no reason, no idea she would want to bring you on, and we can discuss it amicably, intellectually. Ladies and gentlemen, who is here to teach us? I'm here to learn. This is a great topic. We started last week, and it went so well
Yeah,
that we needed to actually complete it because it have been segmented maybe into three sections
yes.
where we can actually delve into the roots and the history. And there are questions in the comment section. We'll post it to her, and she will be able to answer some of those questions. The one that she cannot
Absolutely.
answer, she will go ahead and do the research. The next segment will come back and then follow up. So that's what debate is all about. Ms. Kawu, thank you very much for what you do. What you do is very important to us. My children were born here. They don't know their history as much as you have delved into it. So this is a favor you're doing for us parents who have our children here. Instead of going to the University of Liberia or flying into Maryland to get the history, we are getting it from you free of charge. It's cheap. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. You really outshine Dennis when it comes to the introductions. you you know how to market things for sure. You're natural. But we had a good time on Saturday discussing kind of the political what really made Councillor Nete Sie Brownell such a political legend in Liberia. His ideology, how he really shifted initially his political understanding as he learned. One of the things I most respect about Councillor Nete Sie Brownell is that as he traveled and learned and explored the world and got to understand that the world was bigger than just being a Grebo man in Liberia. It was about him being an African person in the world, which was being dominated by Eurocentric people. And he got that understanding when he went to Europe that, hey, these people don't only, he went to Europe with Dr. Marias, basically on an anti-Liberian government campaign. And when he got there, he realized, hey, these people don't only hate the government of Liberia, they don't only hate the so-called American Liberians, they hate all of us. They're enemies to all of us, and they don't like us either. And when he had that awakening, his entire political ideology shifted, and he became an Africanist. And this is one of the few people that you can see with that kind of transformation in Liberian history. So for that reason, I find him to be an exceptional human being, an exceptional intellectual. Because once, you know, a mark of an intelligent person is that as they know better, they think better and they do better. Always having that room to grow and learn. And I feel that's one of the reasons I wanted to highlight him as a personality. There are many other great people we'll cover over time, but Dr. Brownell certainly deserves the spotlight. I mean, Councillor Brownell, sorry, certainly deserves the spotlight.
Mhm.
So Councillor Brownell, of course, he was born in the year 1894. Um, you know, he was born at a time when Liberia was in turmoil, really. We talked a bit about his early life last week. You know, he lived a very uh, prosperous and successful. When I say prosperous, I'm not talking about rich. He wasn't a wealthy man, but prosperity in the sense of him being able to leave his mark on the Liberian legal and political system. He has a political legacy and uh, um, a legal legacy that has lasted for generations. Many of the politics of those of us who've come after him, sometimes we don't even realize that it's Council Brownell, whose ideology we're building upon. He doesn't necessarily, I think, get the credit that he deserves. So that's do you want to go ahead with the presentation? Any questions? Do you have any
I mean, this history, I mean, when I look at the the suit this guy is wearing, his dress, you can tell that this was a well-learned man who was meticulous in everything he did. I mean, this is just amazing. Just imagine having someone like that represent you in a court of law.
right?
When your lawyer walks in, it exudes confidence and knowledge. So this is. I'm not putting anybody down in Liberia, but they are lawyers. When you see them, you ask, you know, who are you? And then there are some people, when you look at them, you can tell that they are men and women of stature.
Yes.
This is awesome. This is awesome. And I don't know when this picture was taken, but whenever it was taken, that is a great photograph.
This photo was taken probably around the time that he was a vice presidential candidate for the against Tubman. So that's when, you know, that's when this photo was most likely taken.
Awesome, awesome,
Yeah,
awesome,
I think that was
awesome.
his official photo.
I know you wanted to go briefly, just breeze through for those who were
Mhm.
not here the last time. Uh, I like the name of this town called Rocktown. Can you imagine somebody was born in Rocktown? Um, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining the show, please do us a favor. Share the show, invite your families and friends to come to this. This is non-political here. This is academic in nature. It is good for old folks like us who have children and grandchildren and want to educate our children. If you have always wanted to take all your children and your grandchildren to Liberia to learn the culture, the people, why you saving that money, you can start from here. You are learning about the great men and women of the Republic of Liberia. I mean,
Yeah.
when you look on social media, all you see is degrading photographs of our people, our cities, our culture, our women. This is not it. So I do not expect that this play will have 10,000 views because we are not sure about those kinds of stuff. But it behooves you to invite your children to sit
Yeah.
by you and listen to something that will imbue their upbringing, something that will make them to be proud of Liberia and Liberians for who we are. So this is great. I know you say he was born in Rocktown, Maryland County. They're waiting for you to explain it. I'm just a peon here.
Yeah, so Council Burnell, he was born in Rocktown, Maryland County. His parents, of course, were Grable, what we call Grable today, but Grable people. He was born in 1894 during a time of turmoil in that region. There were a lot of inter-clan wars. There was discussed in the past episodes about the issues with some of the Grable clans wanting to raise the British flag on Liberian soil and others wanting to defend Liberia. So there were a lot of battles happening around the time he was born. He was educated at Cuttington, and so on. So we went over a lot of this last week.
That's correct.
And I think where we pretty much left off was discussing the conflict that that led to his arrest. So I just wanted to, kind of, if you could fast forward to slide 31, that would be where we left off from the last show. Sorry about that. I should have.
Sure.
So last week we talked a lot about Mariah. So what we're going to talk about today is Councillor Brownell, the opposition, the staunch opposition to Tubman. He had connected very well with President Edwin Barkley, not Arthur, but Arthur's nephew Edwin. Basically went and explained to Edwin what the plot was against Liberia. This is a time where the world was changing dramatically, and Tubman becomes president of Liberia through some very strange circumstances, and initially this is accepted. Edwin Barkley thought that he could mentor Tubman and help Tubman continue on this road of a Liberian-centered economic plan, an Africanist connection to other countries. African countries were trying to run, the Europeans out of their command and control, and Tubman was more allied with Western powers. They felt that he was a bit of a Western stooge. He was too much. He wasn't sticking to the plan of walking the fine line and still advancing the cause of African people while, pandering to the West as much as he could to avoid Liberia being destroyed. It was a very difficult position to be in at that point in history. Councillor Brownell and Edwin Barkley and others also were upset that Tubman was not allowing the democratic process to prevail. Liberia had turned into a dictatorship. And this dictatorship was basically structured to support the interests of the West, is what they were arguing and what they thought. And they said that Liberia was no longer functioning for the benefit of Liberia, that it was basically an economic annexed extension, I should say, an economic extension of the United States via Firestone and all of the U.S. interest, economic interest, and no longer really any benefits that were happening for Liberian citizens were kind of secondary and kind of a byproduct of the greater goal, which was to promote not European, but American economic imperial interests. So it's a little bit complicated, but it really isn't. The simple way of putting it is they felt that Tubman was a puppet regime whose primary goal and aim was to make sure that the United States of America had their economic interest in Liberia put first and foremost on the table. Anything having to do with Liberians and their interests would be secondary. So you're going to build JFK Hospital. This is a byproduct of, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, you're doing all this, you're enriching us. We're going to build hospitals. We're going to build some bridges, some infrastructure. We'll build some schools. We'll send an army of missionaries in to open schools all over the place. You're going to have some productivity, so your citizens aren't going to be completely ignored. We're going to, invest in them, but it's a fraction of what they're retrieving and extracting from the country. And this enraged Edwin Barkley and others because during Tubman's era, Liberia was prosperous only in the extraction industry. The productivity that Liberia enjoyed before Firestone had come in under President King, and then Barkley, and then later Tubman, it had even been worse. So Liberians were no longer manufacturing things like they had been in the past. Liberians were no longer having the diversified economies that they had, the economic situation that we had in the past. It was now, we were basically an extraction country growing cash crops for Firestone and focusing on mining industry, again, extraction for the benefit of other countries. And this was a problem. So that's where the political conflict came in. In 1955, the opposition is accused of trying to assassinate President Tubman. Now, this is a big, big deal. So, give me 1 second here. So, basically, what ends up happening is President Tubman, some say, was making this up, that they weren't really trying to kill him, that he was just doing this to kind of silence and be able to control the opposition because he was a dictator. But on the 17th of September 1955, the New York Times published this clip. Liberia accuses 30 people of treason. Monrovia, Liberia, September 16th, 30 persons have been charged with treason and sedition in a June 22nd attempt on the life of President William V.S. Tubman. They include Paul Dunbar, the assassin. So Paul Dunbar supposedly was the one who was doing the assassination, and 3 lawyers, all unsuccessful political candidates. Nete Sie Brownell, former Attorney General, Raymond Horace, former Solicitor General, and Booker Talifero Braswell, legal advisor to former President Edwin Barclay. Trial is slated for November. So there was this whole propaganda sent out to the Associated Press. All of the major newspapers around the world published this, and everyone had, felt that Tubman narrowly escaped being assassinated by these, horrible human beings, these people who were committing treason against their own country by trying to get rid of their beloved president. So as you can see, the hype was all there. And there are a lot of scholars who believe that this never actually happened, that Tubman was actually making this all up for publicity. So
this is very strange. I'm talking about the wording of the New York Times here seems to me it was just basically cut and paste. They just send them this and they took it because I'm looking at the particular sentence that said all unsuccessful political candidates. Newspaper people don't write like that. I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's 1955. A lot of the stuff in 1955 was a little crazy like this, but yeah, it definitely was a press release. It definitely was a press release.
Yes, and I'm looking at the entire opposition here. The names on here, these are not regular people. These are top tier politicians, highly educated, highly knowledgeable, very successful potential leaders of the country. And this was an attempt to swap 30. We're not talking about 3, 4, 5. We're talking about 30 of the opposition, the entire opposition. Tubman.
Yeah.
Just to throw light on that. Thank you very much.
So of course, they didn't include did not include Edwin Barclay, but Barclay, was one of those who were there was a time when Tubman basically, if you were a Barclay, they used to call all the oppositions Barclays because they felt Barclay was President Edwin Barclay, former President Edwin Barclay was the leader of the opposition. So if you were anti-Tubman, you were labeled a Barclay. Oh, the Barclays, and it was such a time of fear and intimidation that if you were accused of being a Barclay, this was a bad thing. Your neighbors file you and go report, oh, this person at Barclay. You could have been arrested and sent to Bella Yala just for being accused of being a Barclay. So we're making light of it, but this was actually a time where President Tubman was really showcasing himself as the prototypical dictator for all dictatorships that were to follow in Africa. Because you remember, this is the mid 1950s. Africa didn't have dictators yet, right? He was the first. So when we talk about Mobutu SeseEko, we talk about all of these people, Tubman was their prototype. That's who they were. That's who they were emulating. Liberia is a lot of firsts, the oldest republic on the continent of Africa. And so therefore, you can't call a king a dictator. It's a different kind of thing, right? Dictators exist in modern states. So Tubman being president that refused, the very first president of Liberia that refused to leave office and served more terms than he should have, was the first dictator on the continent. All of the presidents before him left when their terms ended or they died. If they died or got sick before the terms ended. Some resigned. We had an impeachment. We had an assassination, as in the case with E.J. Roy. But for the most part, the presidents, he was the first that became president for life and overstayed his term, and also stopped, allowing, the legislature. He controlled the legislature. That had never happened before him. There were a lot of things that happened under President Tubman that were unusual for Liberia. I know a lot of times we talk about Liberia having been this. You hear people say, "Oh, it says 1847," but no, it was not like that before 1847. Tubman era was weird. It was an anomaly. It was abnormal in Liberian history. So Edwin Barclay and other people who knew better and had seen other presidents. Barclay had been a president. His uncle was one of the greatest presidents in Liberian history, Arthur Barclay. He's looking at this like, what's going on? This is Liberia. Well, we've lost our country. We had an episode on Tubman, 2 episodes on Tubman. We talked about all of his wonderful achievements. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about his opposition, but when it comes to Nete Sie Brownell, that's really who he was. It's a staunch opposition to Tubman. And in fact, almost all the Liberian intellectuals were in opposition to the Tubman administration. Because of this, again, he is now, for the first time in the history of Liberia, we have a dictator. We have a leader that has, extreme power. It was never the case before this. Anybody that even came close to behaving this way was Charles D.B. King, and they impeached him because of his obnoxious behavior. So this is the King situation. The legislature is now in his pocket. This is the first time you have a president in Liberian history controlling the legislature. Is Tubman. It never happened before this. Before Tubman, the legislature was extremely powerful. They could impeach the president. They often overrode what the president was doing, rejected, presidential assertions and initiatives, and said, no, we're not doing it. So this is the first time in the entire history of Liberia from its independence, 1847, that the legislature does not have or does not exercise the power of impeachment or rejecting what the president's doing.
You, real quick, you said in your previous statement that Barclay wasn't charged, he wasn't mentioned, but as you go down the line, they indicted somebody that was very close to Barclay. His legal advisor, Mr. Briswell. That is basically just send him a message that, listen, you next. If this thing continues, you next.
So Tubman, Barclay was always. You have to go back, for all of you watching, go back and watch the Barclay Tubman episodes. We did a whole thing on Edwin Barclay and then Tubman and how the relationship was. It was really Edwin Barclay feeling that he had the authority to control Tubman and was okay with Tubman becoming president of Liberia. It was an arrangement, really. Tubman was really actually installed, based on what I've gathered. He wasn't really duly elected. So it was an arrangement. And the US government was really, Tubman was the Firestone lawyer. This was really an economic takeover of our country. And I'm not really sure why Barclay thought that Tubman would still protect the country and still put Liberian interests above America's interests. But clearly that's not what happened. And then you see Barclay, becoming full-blown opposition to Tubman. Became a thorn in Tubman's side. And the relationship between the two men soured. And Barclay did everything he could to get rid of Tubman. Part of me believes that they really might have tried to assassinate him. Part of me believes it because they knew that he was an illegitimate leader. They knew that he was an illegitimate president. So they may have actually tried to assassinate him. Like I said, there's a whole school of thought that says this is made up. It was all staged and they weren't actually making an attempt on his life. But I really wouldn't be surprised if they had, because they felt that he was illegitimate. And per our Constitution, You know, there's no provision for coup, but there is a provision for citizen militia if someone, you know, is occupying power unlawfully. Citizens have the right to protect their constitution. So we can go to the next slide. Oh, you're already there.
Yes.
So Brownell was the vice presidential candidate for the Independent True Whig Party during the controversial 1955 presidential elections. He was subsequently charged with treason for conspiring to assassinate President William V.S. Tubman, politically disgraced and imprisoned. But later he was pardoned. Now, people always say, "Oh, you know, it's been a one-party state. We've only have never had opposition until, you know, the coup and all this kind of stuff." And clearly, that's not true. Um, there was staunch opposition, and in fact, they created the Independent True Whig Party. We know the first political party, the party of Joseph Junior Roberts, James Phipps Payne, Stephen Allen Benson, and Daniel Bashill Warner, was the Republican Party. And we know that Edward James Roy was the first president of the actual True Whig Party, which was actually True Whig Party was a radical party when Roy created it. It was the party of the recaptured Africans, the indigenous people. It was the inclusive party of the dark-skinned repatriates. It was the party of inclusion. So one of the reasons the True Whig Party got so massive is because it was an inclusive party. It was not an elitist party. You had a lot of people like the father of Daniel Edward Howard from Bassa. You had a Bassa man at one point, chairman of the True Whig Party. So you had a lot of these educated indigenous people that were running True Whig Party. So this concept that people have of the True Whig Party is actually very, very warped. We're looking at history backwards instead of looking at it chronologically and how things progressed and then later digressed. This is a period of digression for the True Whig Party. So they don't want to get rid of their party because they believe that in the party mantra, this Liberian-centered Africanist party. So now they create an independent True Whig Party. They say, you can't have our party, but we're going to have an independent True Whig Party that's going to fight the tyranny of Tubman. We're going to fight this guy. We're going to take back our party, and it's going to be a party of inclusion again. It's going to be a party of liberation again. And that fighting spirit of Liberia is going to return, and we're no longer going to be under the thumb of Western imperialism. Clearly, that didn't happen. But again, he was in prison. They disgraced him, dragged Councilor Brownell and others to jail. Like I said, there were 30 people involved in the scandal. Any questions on that?
No, the usual. I'm looking at after you beat the man, you drag him down the major streets of Monrovia, make him to be little or nothing. Then you turn around and you say you pardon him. You give him a presidential clemency. For, I don't know.
Yeah.
But let's look at the weapon introduced here. I guess the weapons were introduced into evidence.
Yes. So yeah, these are actual photos of the weapons. I guess there is a machine gun and then two Belgian rifles. They look kind of crude and you know, like they've been reconstructed somehow, like they've been, you know, patched up. They say that Paul Dunbar was the one who was supposed to carry out the assassination. But yeah. that's
one man was the assassin, but then they got three. The other guys, what were they doing with the gun? They were just standing there and say, you know, you go ahead.
I think that Paul Dunbar was a lone gunman, but they're saying that during an investigation they found all of these people guilty of conspiracy.
Wow.
So they were actually sentenced to death. If they hadn't been pardoned, it would have been a different thing. But Tubman, for whatever reason, didn't believe in hanging people. Even though it was a common thing in those days, even in the West. It was common to execute people by electric chair or hanging. So for some reason, Tubman didn't, he ended up pardoning them. But at the time, the Supreme Court of Liberia consisted of D.T. Harris, James Pierre, Lawrence Mitchell, William Wordsworth, and Thomas Boto. Those were the associate justice. And then we had Othello Coleman, of course, and Bracewell's appellants.
We are looking at what we are looking at here. Is there a letter to the president?
Yes. So this basically is a very long, drawn-out letter from Counselor Brownell that he wrote to President Tubman after just basically explaining. And this I am having trouble seeing. If you can go ahead and read that for me, I'd appreciate it. This is the letter from Brownell. It's about 3 4 pages on slides. It was a 1-page letter. It's on 3 slides.
Okay. It says here, "Dear Mr. President, permit me to extend you my hearty thanks and appreciation for the personal interest you took in effecting my hospitalization from November 30, 1957 to March 7, 1958, without any cost to me. The doctors, the nurses, and helpers were most sympathetic, considerate, and tender in their treatment of me. And I have nothing but praise and admiration for them all. I am happy to say that I am much improved, and I entertain a hope that at some convenient time, I will be able to go abroad for a complete rehabilitation of my health. Allow me also to thank you for the willing instrument you have proven yourself to be in the hands of the Almighty God in ordering the release of some of us after 2 years, 8 months, and 12 days in answer to prayer. May the Holy Spirit continue to guide you and govern you in all your dealings with your fellow man. I beg that you will remember in mercy the remaining political prisoners still held in custody. May I seize this occasion to extend you my individual thanks for accepting to conduct the affairs of this country for another term of office in consideration of the outstanding and unprecedented progress that has been made during your administration, and to assure you of my loyalty and devotion to the highest interests and welfares of our common country, with very kind solicitation for your continued health, prosperity, and longevity. I am sincerely your Nete Sie Brownell." Isn't that something?
Tragic is what it is. Just tragic and heartbreaking.
Isn't this what we call breaking the soul of a man who stood for something, a man who was defiant, but looking at reality that he is facing his death. Most likely,
and not only his death, but the death of many others, some of whom were
correct.
actually possibly completely innocent. So he had a tremendous cross to bear. I'm not sure that he would have kind of respectfully allowed himself to be subdued in this manner if it was just about him. But you had a list of 30 people, and I'm certain, if at all anyone was guilty, at least some of them were not. But they were all supposedly facing execution.
Unprecedented progress that you have been made under your administration. Unprecedented.
Which is the absolute opposite of what he actually believed, clearly.
And what Tubman wanted was the last line here, where he says, "During your administration, and to assure you of my loyalty and devotion to the highest interests and welfare of our common country. That's all Tubman wanted. Devotion and
Yeah.
complete loyalty. That's that. If you didn't write anything else.
Yeah, let me also point out something very important that happened that same November. Edwin Barclay died under very strange circumstances in Herbel. So Edwin Barclay died on the 6th of November. And that was, I'm sorry, in 1955, not the same year. It was Barclay died in 1955. So this is like, they're in prison. Barclay dies. They stay in prison for two years, an additional 2 years, because they were already in prison when Barclay died. But they remained there for an additional 2 years, and then Tubman released them. So Barclay, their political leader, his mentor is gone. He's no more. And with Barclay's death ends a continuous era of leaders. There's a certain torch. If you watch the Liberian History Channel and you watch these presidents, there's a certain torch that was passed from president to president to president. You have a period where Charles D.B. King drops the torch, Barclay picks the torch back up. Barclay was the last torchbearer in that succession of presidents. So Barclay dies, people feel that all hope has died. It was a very dark thing that happened. Barclay's death ended an era. He was essentially the last torchbearer. People say that Talbot tried to resurrect the torch, and which is why he was killed. But Barclay essentially was the last torchbearer. And so everyone basically when this happens, people put their, everybody kind of, pulls themselves together. I mean, this is the time when William David Coleman, they go and assassinate Coleman over the same thing. The son of President Coleman and his son, President Coleman's grandson, they assassinate them in their yard, and those two went out like soldiers. They were held up in their house when the presidential guard went to go arrest them. They came out shooting. They came out firing. They didn't surrender. They said, over our dead bodies, our bodies you'll take from here. And David Coleman and his son came out with their guns blasting, and they were killed. They were outnumbered, outpowered, and killed. So this was not just some time of peace, and everything was not just all gravy. So
Tubman was the original Machiavelli of Liberia. Any means necessary, and the end justifies the means. This is it. I mean, you crush all your opposition, and basically nobody remains. And the few that remain, in order to save their own life, they had to pledge complete loyalty and commitment to this unprecedented development. Unprecedented.
I mean, there was a lot of development. You had the cooperation of the West, like I said. You have economic annexation, and as a result, we're going to throw you some bones. One of the things that the economic annexation required was that the Liberian, it was requiring that the Liberian population have some level of education. Tubman was very big on that. And I want to believe, I don't have any evidence of this, but just on my own thinking, is that I believe Tubman wanted the education to come in, and he believed that the next generation was going to be better poised to take Liberia out from under the economic annexation. Before we can do some comments before we get to the commission, the April 14th commission.
Okay, let me go to one here that I think this might be from somebody who knows, an educated person who is in the know of history. She said here, thanks to a presenter, and that would be you. The plot that never was, just exactly as you said it. These things were staged,
Yeah,
again?
I mean, so there's no evidence it was staged. But like I said, a lot of people believe it was. And when I study history, I like to see some kind of documentation. Um, Even with Brownell's letter, he didn't, and I understand that he was, yeah, possibly afraid, but you don't have this vehement denial either. You don't have any record of the vehement denial of being involved in this plot in the way that you could say was staged.
But
Um,
isn't it so that to be forgiven, to spare your life, you have to be remorseful. You got to show remorse. And by saying,
yes,
I am sorry, you are an unprecedented leader of this country, I pledge my loyalty
yes,
and my commitment to you. Those were all, I mean, that, you know, plausible deniability. You want to say something. How could you go from being a challenger to all of a sudden, on the flip side, this
yeah,
guy is the best thing I ever having besides other, before or after sliced bread and all that other stuff. So it kind of makes educated people wonder how
yeah.
is this
I mean,
possible?
you had Attorney General Abayomi Cassell, who, Abayomi Cassell, who um, headed the panel of investigation. Uh, they're the ones that supposedly did this investigation. His investigation is well documented, and they were able to say that these men met and organized this based on the interviews they conducted. So Abayomi Cassell's um, documents out of his investigation support this. Now, is it possible that Mr. Cassell made this up? It's possible. It is possible.
We got
Um,
we got a next comment here
mhm.
from Few Will. Obviously, there has to be a disclaimer here because he's a king of the Todmans. He says same thing. He said what you were talking about Barkley versus Todman, the arrangement here. He is saying here the same thing with the Ellen did with we have an arranged president to protect her family.
Um, I think that's a bit obnoxious. You know, Sometimes people have these little personal issues and they like to take history and personalize it. Even if you believe that George Weah wasn't elected, which I believe he was. I know he was elected. We don't have that. Liberians voted for Weah. So unless you can prove it, you guys can go ahead and spread propaganda. This is not the platform for it, without evidence. But I believe George Weah is a duly elected president, which is why we're going into elections. If you don't like Weah, vote him out. If Ellen voted for Weah, she has one vote. I don't believe that the 2017 elections were rigged or fraudulent. I want to say that here, point blank.
No, I don't think he meant that it was fraudulent, but he said the arrangement, the favoritism to
Even if you say an arrangement and you say that, it says, if you can go back, please, to his comment. And I wanted, because when people say this, what they're basically saying is that this woman was a sitting president and her administration oversaw the election. It does have that tone. And I do want to say that I don't believe, even if she supported Weah, which, whatever, it still does not mean that she installed him to protect her family. That's ridiculous. And Edwin Barkley is not the one who installed Tubman. The US government did. So Tubman's installation was not to protect Barkley. It was not to protect Barkley's family. So I don't understand even the analogy. It has absolutely the two things, just there's no comparison. Barkley did not need protection from anybody for any reason at all. And while he cooperated with this very powerful United States of America to transition to the Tubman administration, and he felt he could advise Tubman, this was not a Barkley initiative. This was being done through coercion and manipulation from one of the most powerful countries in the history of the world. So we shouldn't sit here and act like, somebody that Barclay just got up and said, oh, my man, come from Maryland and come rule the country. That's not what happened. This man was a lawyer for Firestone. This was essentially an economic takeover of Liberia.
What's about the next statement here? This is from Michael Padmore. He said, I was blessed to spend time with Pauletta Coleman Padmore, the last surviving daughter of David Coleman, and she will be, I guess she will talk about this plot. Kao, I think this will be an opportune time for you to reach out to Miss Pauletta for us to actually maybe record her like we do on NPR, National Public Radio, where we take people who at the end of a generation and record them for history's sake. Maybe this will be our opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Padmore, wherever you are, I think get in touch with Cole, or we can talk on Sunday, so we can make the connection, so we can do some.
I think she's. I don't know if she's still alive. I think she's deceased.
Yes, he says she's alive.
Okay. You said she's alive? I thought she passed away.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but she has her children and relatives, and Michael Padmore clearly is related. But I think that just from my investigation, I think there was a plot to assassinate him. If all of the people he rounded up were involved or not, I don't know. But I do believe there was a plot to assassinate him, just because they really did not want Tubman to be there. And he wasn't allowing free and fair elections. It just logically makes sense. It does make sense. And so that's my personal belief. If somebody wants to call in and tell us why they don't believe it, great. But just based on my investigation into this, I just don't believe Abayomi Cassell and all of these other people would get together and just make this up.
Right.
It's just hard. It's hard to imagine that all of those people would get together with that terrified of Tubman, if it was the case, he wouldn't have needed it to be the hoax to be so elaborate. Why would he go out of his way to make such an elaborate hoax if it was something that was happening just because he's a dictator? Does that make sense? It's like you can 1 minute and say the man was a horrible dictator, was controlling everything, and then the another hand is saying, but he had to create, get everybody to play this role to make it look legitimate. Who was he afraid of? He could have just rounded everybody up and jailed them without evidence. But there was a lot of evidence presented. That's the problem.
Well, then one of the things we can do if for the sake of oral history, Michael Padmore is one person who is from both sides of the aisle. Padmore married to a Tubman, on the grandparents' side. And I would love to sit with him maybe for an hour and actually pick his mind and his brain and see, what did the grandparents tell you? What did your parents tell you? I know, history has a way. He will want to protect his king, but still, it would behoove us to actually hear what would have been said during the corridors of power.
Let Michael call in. Let Michael call in. We're wrapping up soon, and we can have interaction and let Femi call in and everybody else that's watching.
Let's go to
Anna,
the next
peace. Yeah, peace, Anna. How you doing? Thanks for watching.
The next slide here is the following were members of, this is what the April 14th commission here. That's the slide we are, okay.
So Councilor Brownell, after the riots for April 14th, as we talked about, when Tubman died, when President Tubman died, Talbert took over. And Talbert, being a mentee of Barclay and Brownell, he comes in, he takes over, and he's back to a advanced Liberian-centered economic progression, African-centered economic progression. We're going to talk about regional trade partners, continental trade partners. We're going to be vocal against apartheid. Liberia now becomes, for a very short period of time, Liberia picks up the torch of its legacy again. Talbert now deviates from Tubman's administration in being a blind rubber stamp to Western imperialism. And now Talbert is a voice of liberation for Africa. He speaks against apartheid. He goes to the United Nations. He calls out the United States and others who are going against UN conventions and trading with South Africa, even though there was supposed to be sanctions because of apartheid. Talbert renegotiates trade deals on the continent of Africa between African countries and European countries. He calls in these conferences into Liberia where he calls people from the oceanic countries and African countries and says, hey, we're going to renegotiate these trade arrangements. They're predatory. They're not to our benefit. We're either going to completely cancel them or renegotiate them. I mean, all of these things are happening. And then simultaneously, you have student groups that somehow have a lot of resources to pump up a lot of anti-Tubman administration propaganda. You have student organizations and their leaders all of a sudden have a lot of resources to travel the country and travel the world, similarly to Dan Marias and Brownell, many years earlier, being a thorn in the side of the Liberian government once again. It's like the same exact scenario before Tubman and after Tubman. It's the exact same thing. And Talbert now is there. He orders this commission to review what happened with these riots. Brownell is the chairman, and you had all of these people, Toye Bernard, or Toye Bernard, I don't know how you pronounce T.C. Bernard's first name. You had former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mamadou Dugle, Henry Ford Cooper, J. Dudley Lawrence, Roland Cooper, and then you had Lawrence E. Morgan, Albert T. White, Christian E.W. Baker, Richmond Draper, Fumo Stevens, Carolina Hilton Van E. You had Patrick Sayon. You had George D. Brown. You had Sophie Dunbar. You had former presidential candidate, Defense Minister Ben Kesley, Edward King, Nathaniel Baker, Abraham James, Robert Azango. You had Elizabeth Collins, Lavinia Ash, V. Thompson. You had John F. Scotland, George Flama Sherman of Bassa. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was on that commission. You had David Fahat, Samuel Green, Stephen Yekison Sr., Roland Don, and Masa Creighton, along with our great historian D. Elwood Dunn, who was the secretary to the commission. So this commission was to review the circumstances surrounding this riot. One of the things that the commission basically failed its assignment, but one of the things that came out of the commission was that this was due to some kind of manipulation, that it was not an organic uprising, that there was some manipulation going on. And so what the commission was finding was not favorable to the sponsors of the commission, even though they say Talbot organized the commission, but the commission was doing, was exposing something. And so it was basically shut down. And as we all know, the president was unfortunately assassinated very brutally. And it basically led to the coup. So Brownell really went through a lot of heartbreak as a result of this. In 1979, he actually passed away just before the coup, because he was one of those who saw what was happening to the country. He was older, of course. I mean, he was an elderly man, but he was at this point very, very distraught. Some of the things that the commission discovered took a toll on him, And in some of his later writings, he expressed this disappointment that he had. But he passed away in 1979, and the legacy that he leaves behind is one of patriotism, um, commitment to the country and the country's economic interest, and also, most importantly, understanding that we are all Liberians and we must be Liberian first. That was his mantra. You have to put Liberia above your tribe. You have to put Liberia above all of these things that divide us. He was definitely a person who believed in African nationalism, and he believed that African nationalism begins in your country, in your home, in your family. You know, you can't be an African nationalist and you can't get along with Africans within your borders. So he was a one for inclusion and oneness of the Liberian spirit. So that concludes my presentation on Councillor Nete Sie Brownell. May his powerful soul rest in peace.
Can you opine on the photograph we're looking at?
Yes. So this is an actual Associated Press photo of the student uprising, the April 14th student uprising.
Excellent, 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 excellent. You know, for the Michael Patmos of the world, the Kawus of the world, the Jerome Gibbons of the world, we need to get together and give support to those who study history, whose job it is. I'm not talking about us who are the talking heads to spin and propagandize stuff. I'm talking about those who study this stuff to either rewrite the history or write the history that we have, because most people, when it was just most recently when you started this series, before I found out that the Brownell name that we kept hearing wasn't the mother of the that we been hearing about, that it was Nete Brownell himself that actually wrote this, because I thought Mr. Brownell himself, I thought he had passed away long before Talk My Time.
Oh, Talk Time, yeah.
Because it was such a big, he was so historic in stature that, you know, you thought he was with like John Cllr and these folks. But this is
sorry. For the late 1700s or the 1800s.
That's correct, because, you know,
wow, he must have been old when his daughter was born.
That's correct. But you know, the names are so big and so powerful that you hardly recognize that these people were around as recently as 1979. So he may have died right after the report was completed, because 79 was the riot. So what a piece of work. And I'm glad that a lot of folks who are part of this history are tuning in. And
yeah, I mean, we still have Dr. Dunn is with us, and he's still very much teaching and mentoring us and things like that. He's one of my favorite people in he's the Liberian scholars. You know, President Sirleaf is still with us. We still have a lot of the people that were on this commission are still with us. So,
and some of the names that you are looking at here, when you look at the name Azango, I think that name is still resonating in activism in Liberia. I think what her name, May Azango, that's her name. I don't know whether she has any relationship, but the name is very unique and distinct. I don't think there are too many Azangos in Liberia. And but what she does, writing and advocating, you can tell that that fruit came from this tree.
Yeah, I mean, you have Stephen Yekison Jr., who served in Liberia, served this country. You've got Edward B. and Kesley's son, B. Kesley, B. and Connor Kesley, who served this country during the Sirleaf administration. And you've got a lot of people whose children, who are on this list, whose children have either served in government or served in some type of capacity through philanthropy. You've got Forrest Flama, Sherman, his daughter, is a famous, world famous musician. You have all of these people who had, wonderful uh, children and legacies. Of course, Mamadou Dugley, his daughter is not Dugley Talbert, who's still with us. She's still living in Monrovia today. So we've got a lot of legacy here.
So I got a question here for you. I know you are completed, but questions are still coming, comments are coming in.
Sure.
What did
And
this
people
committee?
can call in too if they
Yes,
can.
if you want to call in, the numbers is there. You can call and participate here. I think Sam Waller wants to know what were the achievement of this committee? What they like to say? What did they achieve?
So I basically just said that the committee didn't really achieve what it was set out to because some of the things that we're uncovering, I suppose, were very uncomfortable for certain powers that be. So they didn't really get to accomplish what President Talbert had them to. You have to remember again, this was a time when they were in the process of trying to defame Talbert so that they could, the U.S. government and others have since admitted to this, through the Freedom of Information Act, that they didn't want Talbert there. So this was a time of defamation and trying to drag um, Talbert. So if the commission is uncovering this plot, they're not going to allow them to complete their task. And so it didn't really do much.
Hmm.
It didn't really do much, unfortunately.
I'm from Basel, so I'm looking at some of the great names. I mean, they are all great, but when I'm
Hmm.
looking at our White, I'm looking at Lawrence Morgan. I'm looking at the Cretons, uh,
Right.
David Fahad. These are when
So
you talk,
bad for people.
yeah, when you talk about G. Flaman Sherman, yes, so uh, you when they first talk to us from Bassa, and rightfully so, they want us to take credit for the successes of the nation, but we also have to take some blame because we were actually okay, like you say, it was Monserrato, Bassa, and Sino. So whatever went right, we take credit. But then when something goes wrong, we want to stay back away from it. And I think we need to take responsibility. That
Yeah.
yes, as powerful as those three counties were, um, uh, you know, there were more to be desired if you look at it, especially Grand Bassa County, 80, 85, maybe 90 miles from the capital city, second city, powerful men and
Mhm.
women, presidents from there.
A,
And you
fo-
go
a
to,
founding a founding founding county of the republic. There were only three counties when Liberia was established. Sino, Monserrato, and Bassa. People think that I just had this conversation today with somebody. People don't realize that the Declaration of Independence for the Republic of Liberia, July 26, 1847, was only signed by three counties. Representatives from three counties, Bassa, Sino, and Monserrato. So Grand Bassa has never been marginalized from the Republic. It created the Republic. Our first indigenous president was Bassa. Our second president was not, of the Bassa ethnic group, but he represented the country of Bassa. Stephen Allen Benson was established in Grand Bassa County. So Bassa has never been marginalized, historically speaking. So that thing that Bassa people can be talking, oh, this, I'm like, come on. Grand Bassa County, I mean, the amount of Supreme Court justices and everything else that Bassa has produced. Grand Bassa has been an integral part of the country, more than only second to Monserrato, really, as far as driving factor behind the Republic of Liberia.
another question for you. What was the aim and objective of the April 14th Commission?
Great question. So the objective really was to establish the causal factors of the riots, and then also to see the way forward about reconciliation and trying to figure out how to resolve the conflict. And unfortunately, again, my understanding is this commission started to figure out really fast that these students were not really acting on their own, that this was a form of coercion and they were being, prompted to do these things. So it's an unfortunate thing. And now in hindsight, because we're now in the freedom of information era, and now we have all of this evidence that the Americans, not only evidence, but they had basically admitted to manipulating the situation. Like, you know what, it was a Cold War. This guy was fraternizing with communists. We couldn't have it. You know, there's like, you can understand what happened. I mean, this is the stuff that led up. This is really the stuff that led to the deterioration and the disintegration of our country. This is, if you really want to look at, you know, the root of the Civil War, even, it goes back to 1980. If you really want to be serious about it. And here we have, you know, our country that a lot of people like to say is our, oh, we America's stepchild. I mean, we are an abused stepchild if we're a stepchild of America. I mean, they're literally admitting to manipulating these circumstances for us because, and the excuse is that it was a Cold War. That's crazy to me. And like, remember, we're still sitting down here, nobody's talking about it. You know, we're talking about, oh, you know, we're going to have truth and reconciliation and we're going to have war crimes. And nobody's talking about this. These people admitted to what they did, just like how they admitted to taking out Patrice Lumumba and Thomas Sankara. They don't care. They will say what they did because nobody's going to do anything about it. And I was shocked. I was shocked when I was reading these things. But like I said, it's 2023. For us, we think it's ancient history. You know, we think it's ancient history, so we don't have to worry about it anymore. It's okay. They were right to do it because out of the Cold War. You even have some people say, "Well, why Tubman wanted to assert, you know, his financial economic independence of Liberia for? Why he didn't just sit under the thumb of economic imperialism like Tubman? How dare he try to assert his God-given right to self-determination and the God-given right of Liberians to self-determination? Why he didn't just sit down and be a quiet little slave and let the people do what they wanted to do? You have people arguing that, not necessarily in those words, but certainly that's the sentiment. And, you know, they now want to blame Liberians for wanting to do what all other countries in the world do, which is assert their God-given right to self-determination, especially economic freedom. This was about economic freedom.
We got a question here.
Yes.
According to the author here, looking at the list, he said this list appears to be ethnically diverse. Doesn't seem
No,
to
he
be.
said this doesn't appear to be
Doesn't,
ethnically diverse.
doesn't appear to be ethnically diverse commission. You want to speak to
Yeah,
that?
I don't know who this Sam Willow person is, but he clearly doesn't know who these people are on the commission. And, you know, if you don't know anything about Liberia, then you ask instead of just, you know, making this kind of weird assertion. It doesn't appear that way to you because you don't know who they are. It's extremely diverse. I mean, you've got Brownell. I mean, I'm not a tribalist. I don't get obsessed with, like, you know, people's tribes, but if you know anything about Liberians, you know that pretty much everyone's represented here. I don't know how Yekison and a Kesley and a Brownell and Dukley and all these people, Flocka Sherman. I mean, you got you got Grable, you got Bassa. I mean, maybe I don't know. I mean, Massa Clayton, you got Roland Don, you got a Gill person. I can't even think of an ethnic group that's not here. Maybe they don't have Bella person there.
I think what he's saying here is that most of these people were people who didn't like Toba in the first place. These were the original True Party for who didn't want this man there.
That I disagree with. That didn't want Talbert. I disagree with that. Sirleaf was very, you know, Talbert had her and he empowered her, put her in his cabinet. I don't know where people get this stuff from. Kesley had a lot of respect for Talbert, worked in Talbert's administration. I can't imagine who on this commission didn't like Talbert. Flocka Sherman, you have Councilor Brownell was a mentor to Talbert. I don't know what these people are talking about. Maybe you can call in and explain, but as far as I know, you know, even Talbert was vice president under Tubman. All of these people were close to Talbot. It's a small country. How big is Liberia? These are not his enemies. This commission he put the commission together. So I don't know what Liberians have a lot of weird, you know, beliefs.
But I talked to some of the higher ups, at least to
Mm-hmm.
talk about, and
And,
one particular name I saw on here that person actually identified as anti-Turbo and a mole, and that was Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
I don't agree with that. I know President Sirleaf personally. She held Talbert in high reverence. So I don't know. I mean I've never read or heard her say anything otherwise. I think a lot of that's just political anti-Ellen propaganda. Somebody, if someone says that, they need to prove it. She's still alive. And she worked for him. That was her boss. She took a job in his cabinet. She was Minister of Finance when he was assassinated. So I don't understand where that's coming from.
Because what he told me was in the heyday of 1979 riot, leading up to that riot, they would go into cabinet meetings, and he says, right after, he says, sometimes Turbo would call cabinet meeting 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they would meet. And as soon as they leave the cabinet meeting, Gabriel Backus Matthews and his crew will basically have the minutes of the meetings verbatim
Mm-hmm.
the next day. And he says Turbo would turn to Richard Henry and say, anything here. Everybody started looking at each other, and then at some point they got together and said, we know who the mole is. But that was his understanding, and what the group came to agree to, that this person is the mole within here. There's no way that Richard Henry, there's no way that Bright, no way that Warner, no way that these people are going to meet with Backus Matthews. The possibility here would be only one person. But we also have here, is it true that people were accusing Talbot of being a communist? Because when he spoke at the UN and spoke against the Palestinian right to self-determination, some people said that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
The straw that broke the camel's back for Talbert, it wasn't about the PLO. It was about apartheid. There's a lot of things that happened during the Talbert administration. This was an era during the Cold War. It was white supremacy in Southern Africa was extreme. Rhodesia, South Africa, Namibia. These people were systematically, unaliving thousands of African people. There were many stateless Africans who were in exile from Southern African countries. And they were seeking refuge in Liberia. Talbert, being that Liberia is an asylum for African people, was extending Liberian citizenship and giving passports and citizenship to people like Miriam Makeba, to many South Africans, to many people from Zimbabwe, to many exiles from Namibia, and all of these countries where they were being punished for essentially being African in Africa. Talbert was also speaking up against apartheid. Talbert was also a very staunch Pan-Africanist on an economic level, not just talking, but having economic relationships and connections with Somalia. We have Somalia Drive in Liberia. We have Liberia Drive in Somalia because the Somalian head of state came to Liberia at Talbert's request. We're going to span a trade network between ourselves. And even if they put economic embargoes against us, we're going to trade with one another. He was no communist. He was clearly a capitalist because everything he was doing was about economic progress and free enterprise. What he was doing was asserting his God-given right to economic freedom for not only himself and Liberians, but for all Africans, that we should be fair trade partners and no longer be exploited. That's all. So what you do is you create propaganda and you use the word communism as some kind of catch-all phrase to condemn African people every time they stand up and say, I am a human being like other human beings, and I have a right to sell my own goods, produce my own, income, produce my own standard of living. This is an affront to white supremacy. And so you become an enemy. So one of the things they did was the 1976 Citizenship and Nationalization Laws, which was unconstitutional because Talbert was bringing all these people in and giving them citizenship. They said, hey, we're going to create laws, USAID backed, commission to create the citizenship and nationalization law to stop Africans who were not born, whose fathers were not born in Africa, to no longer be able to get Liberian citizenship. It had nothing to do with our neighbors in Guinea. It was because we're bringing these radicals from South Africa, Rhodesia, and these places into Liberia and giving them citizenship. That is the reason. It just adversely affected our Fulani and other cousins from next door in Guinea overwhelmingly, but it was really aimed at these radical free Black men that were stateless because they were in exile. That's what they created that citizenship and nationalization law for. It was USAID coming in and basically retaliating against Cllr for allowing Africans, for allowing Liberia to be what it was designed to be, which was an asylum for African people. They didn't want that. They didn't want these radical free Black people to come in and make Liberia more powerful. So they said, oh, he was harboring these terrorists from South Africa. I mean, can you imagine? And then people are saying, oh, he was a communist. Where's the communism in the Meserado group of companies? Where's the communism in the Freeport of Monrovia? How is that communism? That's what you call venture capitalism. That's advancing the economic cause of the country.
We have, ladies and gentlemen, you just tuning in. The presentation is basically over. We are now commenting towards whatever comments and questions you have. This has basically nothing to do with the Brownell that we presented. This is comments that people are calling. So I don't want you to make that leap. I don't want you to do that. What we are talking here is strictly what she knows and what she believes, and what you know, what you believe, and this is what we are talking about here. This makes for a great conversation. Few Will said it has been documented and clearly within the Liberian High Society that Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was basically a mole, because right after her boss was assassinated and killed, she worked for the man who killed her boss.
She worked for the man who killed her boss?
Uh-huh.
Who did they're saying she worked for Doe?
Yes.
Didn't she run for Senate and refuse to take her seat?
This is his take on it. That this is his comment here. And close companion to Doe right after her boss's assassination is documented that Ellie undermined Talbot.
That's not true. Let him provide that. So this is the thing about us as Liberian people. We're very we invent things without any type of evidence. I've noticed that. And then so once somebody invents something without evidence, they continue to spread it, and then it becomes reality. And nobody fact checks anything. We just say things. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf ran for Senate, refused to take her seat. That's what is a fact. She refused to take her seat.
But that was later in his presidency. That was 1985, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I don't know what he's talking about, how she started working for Doe. What did she do in the Doe administration? I don't know what he's talking about. Let him tell us exactly what does that even mean. And close companion to Doe. How? Companion? What are you talking about? This man jailed the woman for being political opposition. They're like real people. I mean, you had to like Ellen, but this woman wasn't alive 500 years ago. Imagine if we can distort recent events, how much they'd like to distort things even further back, just because they don't like somebody.
But couldn't you also say, let me play the devil's advocate here, the exact thing that she did with Charles Theodore, wasn't that what she was trying to do with Doe and Kwimokwa and everybody else?
What did she do with Charles Theodore that she tried to do? We could do another show on Ellen. I mean, this isn't about Ellen, but again, the one thing I love about the History Channel is that it's supposed to be fact-based. Anybody can talk free on Facebook and just say whatever they want. They do it a lot because they hear their parents say things or their friends say things. This is not Palava Hut, under the Palava Hut history. What we present here, we present documentation. We present documentation. So again, if you believe that she undermined Talbert, provide evidence. Because even the U.S. government in the involvement in the rice riots and all that, that's documented by themselves. And they've released that information through the Freedom of Information Act to all kinds of different media outlets. So it's not something that, was just rumors. People did used to spread rumors about it. I never used to believe it, but I had to actually see documentation before I actually accepted it. So, if you have any type of evidence, share it, and I'll gladly, concede, or agree. But I'm not going to you can't just say things within any, not even, close companion to Doe. How? What did she do for Doe?
Well,
where's that coming from?
Ladies and gentlemen, the next question.
Where did Mrs. Talbert document these accounts of Ellen? Where? I was in Buenjama in 2011. That woman loves Ellen. I don't know what you're talking about. She was there dancing with President Salif in Buenjama in 2011 for the July 26th program. So tell me where she documented this stuff, and will put the name of the book or the article she wrote, and I will. Otherwise, I don't believe you. You can't just say stuff. You gotta show us where to find it, verify it. Anything I've said here today that you need us to corroborate, I'll present it. Because me, I wasn't there. I only read. I read what is written by credible sources.
The next one here is going to put us in trouble with our neighbors from the south. The open door, Liberia open door policy didn't benefit us. Everyone came and exploited our country. Foreigners came and took over the US dollar. But he believed that it was the Fantin people that came and took over all of our coastal area.
Mm-hmm.
So is it true that the open door policy brought the Ghanaians, the Fantin people, and they took over all of our area, or they had a major impact in
the open door policy had absolutely, this is a the open door policy had nothing to do with Fanti people. Dog it down. I'm sorry. The open door policy during the Talbert administration is not responsible. During the Tubman administration, is not responsible for the Fanti people. It's responsible for all the concession agreements with the mining companies and Firestone and all of this stuff, Lamco. That's what the open door policy is responsible for. The Fanti people are not beneficiaries of the open door policy. They're beneficiaries of ancient artisanal trade and movement is what they are. There were Fanti people passing around here, intermarrying with other coastal people since before the Republic was established.
Okay, Honorable Vat Dixon says here, it is the fact that she did undermine Talbot.
That means nothing to me. Like I've been saying, just show us where to find this information. You can't just say this is a fact. I can get up right now. It's a fact that Gaiman owes me $1 million. What it means? Nothing. He owes me nothing. Anybody can say anything, but I want you all to direct us to where you have this evidence of this.
Well, on the other hand, there could be evidence that are not written, but we're talking about confessions. We are talking about the history, because this person that I talked to that gave me the information, even though I wouldn't, I have promised what all he told us, what all I recorded, what all I have that he told me about. I promised that I was going to keep it secret until he passes on, because that's how critical and how important it is, and I like to protect the person. But some of the stuff that they left here with us is very, very startling.
So you're saying that people have information, but they're scared to talk about it?
No, not at all. Because the interview that I conducted, it was privately done, and I just wanted to hear. I wanted to hear because they were there. They were in the room, and I wanted to know what happened. And this is what, and the one that stood out was this particular one where they came from a cabinet meeting. And right after the cabinet meeting, the next morning, Marcus Matthews, may his soul rest in peace, were reading the minutes verbatim. And that person told me and said, nobody in our midst, in our cabinet.
So the whole building, everything was bugged. So the U.S. government had complete surveillance over everything Talbot was doing all the time. And I don't know, why that's not obvious, but probably to this day, every government building, especially where the president's office is, probably under constant surveillance. We don't have any way to prevent that from happening. And certainly, during the Talbot administration, that was true. I think it's always been true. So the president was under surveillance. So it wouldn't surprise me that Marcus Matthews would probably even get everything that was going on even in real time.
Does FOL have the list of government ministers from 1980 to 1982? And I will tell you absolutely yes. Sam Waller, we have that list, and it is not exclusive to FOL. Anybody can get it, but if you want, we can provide it for you at some point.
Yes, thank you.
Cole, I see the conversation after the presentation is getting really, really interesting, and I think if you do your part 3, or the next person who is in line here, is it Dennis Jar
so this person says her book Lifted Up. Lifted Up was Victoria Talbert's book, if you will. Is he saying Victoria Talbert's book, that Victoria Talbert is saying that Ellen manipulated? Can you clarify that? If that's the book we're talking about?
I think that most likely why he's saying that she might have mentioned that Ellen would have been maybe the scene suspect. So the conversation is great here. I think you need to call. I don't know who's next in line with your book, but your series. But this is turning into a conversation that people wanted to have, but they have never had.
They want to have the conversation and use it, Cllr Brownell as an excuse.
Yeah, but listen, when you are on social media and nobody's seeing you, you can say whatever you want to say, and it's good that they are bringing it out, because some of these folks were actually related to some of these folks. So it is good that they are getting it out of the system. With this
but they're not calling it. They don't want to call. They just want to write.
No, because we don't want you put a voice with a face. But we can say what we want to say. But this is great. I love this. Not to put you on the spot, but who do you think would be the next person that you will be discussing, the next historian or next history maker? Hopefully, it's a woman.
So we've concluded Cllr Brownell, and we are going. So let me just give you a little background of what Dennis and I have been doing. So we started out talking about kind of the Vi people and kind of their whole history, but through the experiences of Beslow. Right, of Thomas Beslow. And so now we kind of looked at the Grebo people, but through the experiences of Brownell and the people that he came from. So that was what this process was. So the next thing we're going to look at is we're going to kind of do like we're by region. And so we're now going to, after this, we're going to get into the Lama Kisi, the people of Lofa. We're going to look at the people of Lofa.
Excellent.
And kind of focus on some of those significant figures from that region of Liberia.
Ladies and gentlemen, you guys who are politicians, when she says significant, doesn't mean you are not significant. We are talking about, you know, history makers, people who lay down their
Yes,
lives,
sir. That's correct.
sacrifice, and did those things. That's what it is. So don't go wrong with your cheap politics and say, oh, Magnus Cassell, interesting trivia, isn't it? Well, you see, when from they say you pour rope pour bush, when you start asking these questions, all of these questions come trivial, and this is great, and this is how historians do their thing. I think maybe I will call Dr. Dunn and see if he can appear with you one of these days and lecture all of us. Guy, he's while he's still here and doing a great job, we might well record him for posterity. I mean, this is
Yeah.
great that we do this. So I'm going to
And
try.
the nice thing about Dr. Dunn is he's written so many books and captured so many of these
That's
things.
correct. That's correct.
So it's not, you know, for me, one of the things that writing a credible book does is it forces you to cite sources. Loose talk is easy, but when someone sits down to write a book, they have to cite sources. They have to write, if you're a credible author, you're gonna write, you know, where you're getting this information from and how you drew these conclusions. It's a real academic exercise. I'm not saying every book that every librarian ever wrote is at that level, but because Dr. Dunn is a PhD and he understands, he's a scholar, he knows how to write and he knows how to write something credibly. So a lot of the things that are written about Liberia are not peer reviewed. So anybody could just go put pen to paper. But the thing about Dr. Dunn, Dr. Burroughs, and others is that when they do write, conclusions they draw, they present the evidence for why they're drawing those conclusions. And you can then look at that evidence for yourself and determine if it makes sense. This is very different from loose talk or rumors, right? Because now you're citing actual documents, you're citing evidence in your writing, and you're drawing conclusions based on that.
Yeah,
And that's
but let me push back a little bit here. I know several times you have discussed that we should not discount the oral history of our folks because even though they were not written, they are still credible. So we can't, on the other hand, say that oral history is important. And then on the other hand, we say if these guys heard it from their parents, some of these folks were in the corridors of power when these things happen. We can't,
yeah.
we can't
You
dismiss.
can't completely discount it, and oral history is often distorted. I also say that a lot because when you say something, if you ever play the game telephone, everybody's standing together, you whisper something in the person's ear, they whisper this, but by the time it reaches the end of the line, it's a different story. Oral history, that makes it inconsistent. And so what I always do is I look at the oral history and I measure it against documents. One of the other issues we have with oral history is that usually the dates and times are off, a lot of things like that. It doesn't mean that it's not credible. A lot of times it does tell a pretty good story and it does match actual historical events, but there's a lot of flaws. And especially when some of the accounts are not eyewitness accounts. Eyewitness accounts are very, very important. In this particular case, that's why I said, you know, people just coming under a post and saying, this person did this thing. Okay, how do you know that? That's not oral history. That's not an eyewitness account. Someone saying in 1977, I was sitting with President Sirleaf. She said this to myself and this other person. We heard it. We understood it. This is more of an eyewitness account. There's details, there's dates, there's times. It makes more sense. But to just throw out an accusation is not the same as an eyewitness account or oral history.
Okay, and here the conversation continues. Listen, guys.
I would not stay here all day with
Yeah,
it.
I'm gonna get.
But yeah,
I'm gonna get her just 3 more minutes. We'll be out of here 10 after 9, and
okay.
the comments are coming. It said 4 ministers from Toba's cabinet remain in the cabinet of Doe. George Bullitt became the Minister of Presidential Affairs,
Yes.
while Gabriel Tucker, Kit Bryan, and Lusana Donzo retained their posts at the Ministries of Public Works, Health, and Welfare.
Yes.
Okay.
That's true.
I mean, now we're getting somewhere. Again, I made a correction. He said, Magnus said, Lucina Danzo stay at action for development and progress. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is great
Um,
conversation, great
the
topic.
Minister of Health was under Samuel Dole was not the Minister of Health under Talbert.
We'll do the research. We'll find out who the first cabinet ministers were, and it's like we said, it's a matter of public information. We will be
Yeah.
able to do that.
So
But
we've got
here, most of the ministers now. We got Gabriel Baker, Matthew, Chia Chico. Some of these people, I just know them from the top of my head. I know their faces.
You're not that old, Jerome.
And when they could to play, I was 19, so I was old. I was that old.
Meet the new cabinet ministers.
Yes, I'm looking at Gabriel Baker, Matthew right here. First one, Chia Chico.
Look at my in-law Fambula there.
Yeah, Fambula, George Bully. Took my Tipote, the whole crew, family right here. So you were part of this too. You were not born yet, but
who wasn't born in 1980? I beg you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got 1 minute here to go. This has been very captivating. Thank you very much for what you do. This is great. We need to continue to do this. Bring people on. We need writers. Like I always say, in Liberia, everywhere else, they say, I want my child to be doctors and lawyers. But the most important subject, which is the amen, we say in Liberia, Yeyia, okay? The roots,
yeah.
Our roots that goes the deepest of all. History, they say, man, why history will pay you? History, people don't be right, they don't make no money. Doctor, you will make a lot of money. Lawyer, you will make a lot of money. You will be a teacher. But that is the genesis of everything else. Who do you think taught the lawyers and the doctors? They're teachers, historians that taught them. Cole, give us a closing so we can let you go on to your family.
Yeah, so I love history, and I hope you understand the difference between the conclusions I draw are really based on information that I've gathered, and doesn't mean that, especially the last part of this conversation, it doesn't mean I'm 100% correct. Of course, I'm not, but it is based on information I've gathered. And so I am very much open to learning. So if you have actual evidence or information that contradicts what I've uncovered, please share it, please present it, because it's important that we put all information on the table so we can assess it and make sense of it. I do want to make that clear. So I'm not discounting what anyone's saying, except, to push you to present evidence so that we can really paint a better picture. Much of our history was intentionally distorted. So I'm very protective of the information that we have on Liberia. Very protective in the sense that I like to authenticate, re-authenticate, and verify before I say something. And there's a lot that I have learned through this journey, and I have so much more to learn. The purpose of me coming on here is just to share the information I've gathered and hope that it inspires you to do some digging as well. Maybe in the future we can have a show on this topic, since it seems like it's a very interesting topic for folks, and we can come and just kind of lay everything on the table and see what makes sense. Much of this is stuff that we have that is so recent. It's not even archival research like what I do for Liberian presidents and other things. This is very recent. These are very recent events, and it's very easy, politics aside, to really get to the truth of what occurred. And I'm happy that the U.S. government has the Freedom of Information Act, that they're able to release the role that they played in this process. Because a lot of our people have completely absolved them of responsibility, and for them to have been able to come out and release some of the culpability of their agents and actors, in Liberia is for me is a bit liberating, and it helps us to understand how we got here. Uh, Also, the purpose of the Liberian History Channel is to really resurrect the pride that we once had in our country and in each other. And I've always been raised to be proud to be a Liberian. I've always been raised to be proud to be a Mono woman. But the more I learn, the more proud I am. And I honestly believe the more that all of us know about our country, the more proud we'll be of our country. And that's what I wanted to share. So please tune in next week. We're going to be discussing the people of Lofa, the people of Lofa, and what is Lofa? Why is Lofa part of Liberia? Why Lofa not in Guinea? You know, so the history of that region and its people, its diversity is what we're going to discuss, and we're going to highlight some of the great leaders that came out of Lofa, from King Buze, that we talk about Buze quarters, to what do you call it? E. Sumo Jones, Edward Kesley, all of these people will highlight a lot of them and some of the great kings of Zorzo and other areas in Lofa over the years. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Great. Before we go, Mr. Sam Wallow, thank you for watching. Magnus Cassell, Michael Patmore, River Says Pro,
Yes.
Phil Will, Vat Dixon. I mean, the folks are, but you know, is watching.
You can pronounce some names too, Jerome.
So
Wow.
next Saturday we are going to be here, and as usual, I will be tuning because I want to learn. We always said, for some reason, when we were growing up, for us that grew up in Bassa, I can tell you we never left. I never went to Riverside, never went to Nima, never went to Bong. It was right there. We got common borders because we felt like if you left Bassa, you would fall from the face of the earth. So everything was right there. And I believe the other people felt the same way too. So we were in the little enclaves. But now that we are connected in that, we find out that we got so much in common. Even our food, our tradition, our storytelling, all of these fairy tales you hear. Sometimes you say in Bassa, this is what we say. Then somebody will say, but we said that in Nima. The same people said in Lofa. We are so united. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for Saturday. She will be here. She will be lecturing. Bring your children. Let them listen to some stories. Like she said,
about the great Rofa County, the great Rofa.
We'll find out who all came from Lofa and who all walked from Sierra Leone to Lofa, and who walked from Lofa. Thank you very much.
You always gotta put something in the mix.
Yes, but Mr. John, as we always say, I know you back there. We say no matter who you are, where you come from, this is a great endeavor, and it suits the song that we usually say. We are all Liberian. So if that song was made for anybody, I think it was made for the History Channel. Thank you very much for tuning in, Mr. John. Please take us out.
We are